Die Gedanken sind frei.
My thoughts freely flower.
Die Gedanken sind frei. My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. No person.
Welcome to the Freethought Forum, the program that encourages the open dialogue, consideration, and investigation of a wide variety of ideologies and philosophies in today's society. My name is Irene Scharf, and as a member of the Bexar County Historical Commission and the Helotes Historical Society, I have been asked to moderate a panel of distinguished guests. The topic for this evening is the Freethinkers of San Antonio and the Texas Hill Country. The first two programs covered the historical background, the reasons why they left Germany and immigrated to Texas, and looked at some of the settlements and the lives of some of the early families that came to Texas. Tonight's program is the third in this and final in this third three-part series, and tonight we will look at the Civil War and the events that happened that impacted the lives of these early freethinkers. Our guest panelists this evening are Catherine Farringer, who is the producer of the Freethought Forum, and she is mentioned in this new book called Women Without Superstition, No Gods, No Masters. And there is a chapter devoted to Catherine called Our Lone Star Activists. Next, we have Greg Crowder, who is a historian from the Comfort area in the Hill Country, and he is director and past president of the Comfort Heritage Society, as well as a member of the Kendall County Historical Commission. He is a graduate of the University of Texas, fifth generation owner of the historic Ingenhuet store in Comfort, which is the oldest continuously open country store in Texas. And he's also a seventh generation descendant of some of the early Texas freethinkers. Also with us this evening is Ed Scharf, who is retired from civil service and also a real estate broker. He has a graduate degree from the University of Texas also, and he has been researching the Texas freethinkers for the last 2 years in preparation for our historical marker in the Hill Country. So let's begin with just a little recap from our first two sessions. What is a freethinker, and then what brought the German freethinkers from Germany to Texas. So Catherine, what is your definition of a freethinker?
A new one for every time. A freethinker is a person who is not afraid to examine anything and everything and come to conclusions based on good common sense and reasoning rather than on someone else's word about revelations or what have you. So we just do sort of do-it-yourself thinking, and it's a lot of fun, I find. I like having a mind that keeps me busy wondering about things and pursuing things. So that's pretty much it. It's an umbrella term for anyone who does not have a formal religion or is affiliated in any way or goes for any of that dogma. So.
I believe you phrased it last time, you don't put a girdle around your
Yeah,
mind.
that's right.
No
girdles,
restrictions.
No corsets. And oh, for goodness sakes, don't put those things on those babies with those big rosebuds and that plastic band. That's going to not make a freethinker, I'll tell you right there.
Well, expand your
Whoa,
mind.
yes.
And that's the purpose of this forum, is to expand your mind. So Ed, tell us a little bit about the historical background. What happened in Europe that brought a lot of the German freethinkers to Texas?
There was severe turbulence in Germany in the beginning in the early 1840s. They were experiencing a tremendous famine causing widespread starvation, or on the verge of starvation. The business climate had pretty well collapsed. They were in the midst of a depression. People were losing jobs. It was very much like the 30s, or even worse, that this country experienced. So it was quite a calamity in the country. And at that time, some German leaders decided the country was way overpopulated. I guess this was all before birth control procedures, too. And so they said, we need to dump a lot of people. So they made plans to really move a lot of German citizens move their problems away and move them to the United States. Often what Mexico gets accused of doing, I guess, these days, people coming across the border. The Germans had that same kind of economic situation. And in the United States alone, I think, I believe the figure's around 1.5 million Germans were immigrated throughout the United States during those early years. And during that time, approximately 30,000 of them came to the Texas Hill Country. Later, New Braunfels and Fredericksburg were the areas. But within that group, often hidden from view, was a very important group of about 1,000 people called the Freethinkers, the ones that we're concentrating on today, that settled in this free-thinking Texas Hill Country, the towns of Comfort, Sisterdale, Tusculum, Burney, and that surrounding area.
And Greg, you're a descendant of some of these early freethinkers.
Yes.
What were their lives like when they immigrated up to the Civil War, which was sort of a watershed, I guess you'd say, in their lives? How did they live and what took place?
Well, on one hand, they were very much occupied with just staying alive. Same thing all the other immigrants were involved in: food, shelter. Some of the hostile Indians, there were some hostile Indians in the area too. But at the same time, among the free-thinking communities, they also were very active in education, weekly or periodic meetings at which they would discuss, keep up to date on world affairs, and discuss literature, art. Many of them had brought books instead of tools and such with them to the new country, and they were a very idealistic bunch, which helped them in some instances and hindered them in others.
And I believe they were, for the most part, anti-slavery.
Very much so.
And many were also anti-Confederacy.
Well, they were very much against secession. Most of them went on to become American citizens and take their oath, and they viewed secession as a breaking of that earlier oath. So they did believe in the Union and many of the ideals of the Constitution of the United States.
And what happened to there? I believe there was a group in Comfort, or from the Comfort area, that felt that they were being persecuted, shall we say, and pressured to join the Confederacy, which, as you said, they were anti-secession.
Many of the traits of these freethinkers were also traits that brought them into conflict with the Confederate authorities. And during the early part of the Civil War, when conscription was being forced upon the residents of the central Texas Hill Country, a large group of them gathered not far from Comfort and decided to try and make it to Mexico rather than join the Confederacy and go against their own personal convictions. And Confederate authorities viewed this group as traitors, of course, to the Confederate cause, and it resulted in one of the really bad parts, at least in the Hill Country, of the bad events of the Civil War, and that was the Battle of Nueces. Occurred down in what is now Kinney County, and ultimately it became the beginning of what was a series of events in the Hill Country that culminated in hangings and retribution against many of the German settlers for their beliefs, and because they had been related to or had known people that were part of this group.
This is America.
Right.
Freedom of speech.
And I believe you attended a seminar last year on the Battle of the Nueces in Fredericksburg.
Actually, several of us did. Catherine, I think you were there
Greg, you
too.
were there, weren't you?
Yes, I was there.
And
Sure,
you, Greg,
I thought I
yeah, sure.
remember, yeah.
And was there any new information brought forth about?
No, well, we learned a lot of new things.
A lot of
especially-
a lot of new details that weren't necessarily known before. There's been a lot of primary research that's been uncovered in recent years, but the really the basic basic tenets of the story, I think, remain the same. These people were doing what they believed in, and a lot of them ended up dying for their beliefs.
You might show where they're buried, Craig.
Yeah, after the when the Civil War ended, a group of locals went down and gathered the remains of some 36 men, brought them back to Comfort, and put up what became the first Civil War monument or memorial to be erected in the entire state of Texas, and that's in Comfort now. And about a little over a year ago, it was finally restored and rededicated, and part of the Freethought, current free-thinking group was there to be on hand for the occasion also. Yeah.
Well, there are two very unusual things about that flag. It's a period flag, for one thing.
36-star flag, right.
Yes, at the number of states at the time.
This also in 1991, this site became one of only 6 mass burial sites of American patriots in the whole nation to be given the right by act of Congress to fly the flag at half-staff in perpetuity. So that's quite unique. Some other sites are places like the Arizona Memorial, Arlington, Gettysburg.
It's in with some big names.
Pretty prestigious
And the inscription
company.
is Troya de Union, which is true to the Union. As you said, they stood on their principle. But I believe there's some controversy as to whether or not they felt that they could flee to Mexico without retribution. And I believe September issue of the Texas Monthly has a lengthy article in which you were featured, as well as a Paul Bourrier, and you have sort of different versions of the story.
We have different interpretations. That's always been one of the main points of contention, was whether some type of proclamation had been issued giving these people a certain amount of time to leave the state, and when it was issued. And of course, my belief is that being in such a remote area, they probably received the news rather late, regardless of when it was issued, much as we saw with the Emancipation Proclamation, reaching Texas after a lengthy period of time.
Information didn't travel in nanoseconds like it does today.
No, didn't have computers, right? But so much of what caused this group to take the actions they did were part of their philosophy as free thinkers. It was all part of one. They believed in many of the ideals that the United States had been founded on, in the late 1700s.
So do we know, did the majority of the free-thinking community support the Union?
I think in the Comfort area, I would say almost all of them did, universally, and really in some of the free-thinking communities didn't survive until the beginning of the Civil War, but the ones that did, I think they all opposed slavery, and especially secession.
And then what happened to the free-thinking community after the Civil War? We often hear that had a devastating effect, and yet if the majority of them supported the Union and the Union won, why did it have a devastating effect on their lives?
Most of them didn't survive the Civil War. Sisterdale barely survived it, and really Comfort was the only one that actually survived the Civil War.
These people were really in a vice when you think about it. Here they're fleeing a terrible situation from their homeland, giving up everything, setting up here in the bushes, with the books and the silverware and the candelabras, and, not knowing whether they're going to survive.
Scorpions.
But they're saying, yes, I gave away everything over there, but I have the most important thing I could ever ask for. I've got freedom. I've got liberty. I've got nobody chasing me down, with a bayonet or telling me how to live or how to think. And that's what, I think made them so interesting, really, that they thought they had really arrived in paradise until the Civil War came around. Now, a couple of things come into play here. Not only the free-thinking Germans, but most of the Germans, didn't have slaves. They farmed their own cotton and what have you, and they were usually able to outproduce the slave plantations. This caused a problem with the slave owner. plantations, because Germans could usually get higher prices for their crops because they, you know, really took care of them, tilled better, and spaced their crops and what have you. But then you're living here, and then the government, you know, you think Abraham Lincoln is the greatest, you think Sam Houston's the greatest, but then all of a sudden, the governor of Texas, Sam Houston, gets kicked out of office because he won't sign the Confederate oath of loyalty. And then, I mean, and Abraham Lincoln is sitting way up in Washington somewhere, but here goes, you know, your hero for democracy and freedom getting booted out of office. And now the government comes in and says, we're going to war, folks. You're going with us.
Yeah, and guess
If
what
not,
side you're on?
You're a traitor. You know, this is treason. You want to escape to Canada. You know, you couldn't, like, you know, for the Vietnam War. Canada was a long way away. Mexico was the closest place. It even divided neighbors, saying, well, look, you know, we might as well make the best of it and serve in the Confederacy and survive anyway. You know, what else can we do? So many served in the Confederacy. Even Dr. Cap was the issuing officer. What was the term, Greg, that, you know, since he was the chief?
Oh, quartermaster or something like that?
No, the
provost marshal,
he was
I
a
guess,
provost.
for the precinct, yes.
Yeah, he was in over the whole county or something.
Well, since he had been judge in that area, he automatically became the person responsible for
You converted to
signing up
military
the
then.
people eligible for draft.
And he had to draft his own son, who was died from his war wounds.
Another factor that I'd like to bring out is the freethinkers and the German settlers in large were also a product of ethnic you know, discrimination at that time. A lot of what happened, or some of the things that happened to them, was because they spoke a different language, had different cultures, or different customs, things of this nature. And,
As
Sort
long
of
as
like what happened during World War I and II also
yeah,
in this country.
this was repeated at those periods of time, very much so.
But see, when they were in the hill country, they kind of had their own commune, basically, area. But when the war came along, it spread them out so much. Here you're heading to Mexico through hostile territory with some of them. Many
and they
made
had
it.
many more outsiders coming in.
Outsiders coming in. It was a total upheaval. And it almost put neighbor against neighbor to a large degree. And it just destroyed the whole area, basically, where many said, hey, we've got to go to San Antonio now, or Austin, or Dallas, you know, to look for jobs, basically.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine what might have become if the Civil War had not, you know, destroyed the path of some of these communities, especially these so-called Latin communities or colonies.
Yeah, what would life be like today?
Yeah,
we have so much trouble finding free thinkers.
Because some of these communities included some brilliant people and people that went on, even in the face of adversity, to make some astounding accomplishments. Earlier we had talked about Dr. Herf, for instance. There were many others, many different branches of everything from literature to science.
These people really faced with some tough decisions. Take like Herman Altgeld. You know, first he went to visit an ailing father in Germany for a while, but then came back, and then as did Schleicher, Gustav Schleicher, put on, you know, join the Confederacy. They didn't have a choice except do that or get out, you know, or try to get out. But then rather nice things are said about them by the Unionist Germans that, hey, we always knew their barn door was open if we were on the run or something. You know, I mean, it wasn't a total split. You know, they said, hey, you know, we're all family, basically. Yes, we have the gray uniform and you have the blue, but my barn's always open for if you need a place to sleep. Meaning, hey, if you're on the run, you can hide out, you know, at my place. So they just had to make the best of a bad situation.
It's a very bad situation.
Did they think of themselves as a separate society? I mean, they're bound together by their philosophy of life and their principles. They weren't really an organized society in terms of what we think of an organization today.
Not as far as the freethinkers went. They were mostly mostly belonged to these different communities, and those were the people they related to and dealt with on a daily basis. But no, they didn't belong to a formal organization. Now, with respect to the ones that participated or ended up being involved in this battle, there were paramilitary organizations of varying degrees, but the Freethinkers, they were mainly bound by their philosophy and ideals.
Which was very independent from each other to a large degree.
Yes.
Now the lodge, the Germanic lodge, may have kind of held them together. People ask, how did they conduct marriage or weddings, wedding ceremonies or burial ceremonies? Basically the lodge did this, and the basic message at a death ceremony was rest in peace. At one time, they had called in a minister from outside the free-thinking hill country area, and he was going to lead this whole group in the Lord's Prayer, and nobody knew it. The preacher said it all by himself.
That was interesting.
No one knew the Lord's Prayer, even in the free-thinking hill country.
Yeah.
Which was very.
I can recall one person recently lives in Fredericksburg that considers himself a freethinker. He visited some family's home, and they sat down, and he sat down to pray, and the woman of the household said, "We don't pray in this house." So it's just a very different type of approach than many people are used to. Mm-hmm. But why is it important that we remember these people, and how are we going to commemorate them?
Just looking at any number of things, their sacrifices alone that they made, the philosophy, I think, that had, a very bright hope for the future of this country, if we could have grasped it, what was happening up there. That hey, they had no bias. They were too far in the future for too many of the people that lived in the area.
We're too far in the future, too, it would seem.
I'm afraid you're...
Where is that bridge to the future now?
Yeah. We put up memorials or monuments to people that there's one for Altgeld, rightly so, for founding comfort. But these freethinkers founded not only a whole series of little small villages, a whole area of the hill country, but they also brought a philosophy that they didn't try to force down anybody's throat, a philosophy of freedom and justice and liberty for all.
True democracy.
True democracy, yes.
So is that their greatest contribution, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I guess so.
Greg,
it's their greatest common contribution. Certainly some of the individuals had individual achievements too, but yes, I would agree, very definitely.
And in order for other generations living now and in the future, to recognize these principles by which they lived, I believe there's a group that's going to put up a historical marker.
A group kind of unorganized like these freethinkers were, that saying, hey, this is quite a group of people. And I'll have to say thanks very much to Greg's efforts and Mary Jane Griffin, the chairperson of the Kendall County Historical.
A lot of people that have been involved, really.
Yeah.
And what is the status of the marker?
Well, Ed's done most of the research in the last couple of years. Currently, the narrative's in Austin, undergoing the process by the State Historical Commission for approval, and we hope in the near future to be able to begin plans to erect a permanent marker and some sort of statue or monument in Comfort. Everybody's agreed that that's probably the best single location, even though there were a number of different locales at one time.
It all kind of came together as a very cohesive force at Comfort. Mm-hmm. I think when somebody says, if you don't want to believe in God, move to Comfort. If you want to be a freethinker, you live in Comfort. Right. We're looking into using some limestone out of the Sisterdale area, the Sisterdale Quarry. Ironically, the ground that the freethinkers lived on, and like Greg was saying, possibly put up a very simple monument with a state historical marker, possibly some of the sayings possibly, you know, from that 1854 convention, some of their feelings, some of their ideas.
Speaking of that, what provoked that? What brought that about? What was the propelling force for having that meeting in San Antonio? Were they trying to accomplish?
Every year, they had what they called a singing society, a Sanger Fest. And they would.
They're still Sanger Fest.
They still do, yes.
Yeah.
But
Not
they,
necessarily Freethinkers, but I mean, it's still.
Yeah.
they were somewhat political in nature, but they were sort of a, I don't want to say a protective society, a German advancement group, you know, trying to assimilate into the country, you know, a kind of a, so, you know, hey, we're not foreigners, we're with you type people, a friendship group, but they did like to sing very much too,
Yeah.
and they probably like to drink very much too.
Probably. That's. I think that was one of their resolutions, wasn't it? Let's do away with this
Possibly.
silly business of
Sunday law.
But there was a group with, primarily led by gentlemen or people from the Sistile area that used this occasion to advance a set of, or a group of platforms regarding things such as abolishment of slavery and
Did they
freedom of
actually form a
speech.
political party?
Yes, they did it under the auspices of an organization called the Free Society, and they formed a Texas chapter, Free Society of Texas, and it was actually part of a national organization. But it created quite a stir down here in San Antonio at the time. There were,
I'm sure it made them very popular, didn't it? With it?
well, not so much locally, but among the German
was-
culture it did in the area, yes.
Yeah, I think the newspaper in New Braunfels was kind of trying to defend itself against, you know, some of the vicious attacks that were made as a result of that 1854 convention.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, they were saying we didn't really mean to say stop slavery immediately, but slave owners should be paid by the government to release their slaves. You know, they were trying to water down, but the Sisterdale people never watered much down. They were, I think, pretty direct.
There was especially one gentleman by the name of Degner. He ended up having 2 sons killed in this battle and spent most of the war under either in jail or under extremely high bonds to prevent him from further speaking out. But people such as him were very vocal, and their words were often used by the opposition and applied to the entire body of people.
Well, Catherine, having listened and participated in these 3-part series, would you say the German freethinkers that came to Texas in the 19th century are very similar to other freethinkers that you may have known or studied?
Well, I don't know a lot of them that speak Latin and have meetings. So I think they were much more cultured and more intellectual. Their pursuits were different. Now everybody's a computer nerd, and nobody goes in for language as much. So there's been a definite change there, which is too bad. But freethinkers still love their music. That's a uniting interest.
Well, this concludes our 3-part series on the German freethinkers in San Antonio and the Hill Country. And I'd like to thank our panelists, Catherine Farringer, Greg Crowder of Comfort, and Ed Scharf. And we hope you enjoyed our series.
Die Gedanken sind frei,
My thoughts freely flower.
die Gedanken sind frei, my thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater.
To duke or dictator, no person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei, no person can deny. Die Gedanken